I'm joined now here on Locked On College Football by Alex Donno, our standout host of Locked On Miami Hurricanes. Check him out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's talk about Cam Ward. Your initial reaction to the Canes getting a guy who was initially NFL draft bound.
I was shocked when it happened on Saturday night. I was shocked by the timing. I was really shocked that it even happened in the first place. At the same time, I know how hard Miami recruited him. I know how hard they tried to get him, and it ultimately paid off. But the timeline was crazy. This is one of the weirder recruiting / transfer portal sagas that I've ever covered. Because Spencer, usually when something goes on for this long, it doesn't end up going well for Miami, right? People were drawing comparisons to a recruiting saga from last year with Cormani McLean, like the way this Cam Ward thing drew out, because, as soon as he hit the transfer portal back in December, Miami became a contender instantly. They got him down for a visit. They pulled out all the stops for that visit, including an appearance at by Rick Ross, the famous rapper, at arguably the best restaurant in all of Miami in Prime 112. Like, they hit it out of the park with the visit. They tried to lock him down that week or that day, but he did visit Florida State. And then the waiting game started. And then on January 1st, Cam Ward announced he was going to the NFL. Now, Spencer, even for a few days after that, there were some doubts, because one thing that Ward didn't do, and it's why he was still able to return to college, was he never hired an NFL agent. So he never officially forfeited his eligibility for another season, but he was working out with a quarterbacks coach. He and his father, who did a lot of interviews, Calvin Ward, were kind of saying all the right things about him being committed to the NFL. And then this past Saturday night, we get the bombshell that he's committing to Miami. So the way that this played out is Miami was still keeping in pretty steady contact with Ward. It wasn't the same sort of contact they had before he declared for the NFL draft. They were in conversation with him electronically daily. He was getting texts. He was getting phone calls from Cristobal, Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator. After he declared for the NFL draft, it was one of those things where Miami would check in on him weekly. And the way that Ward's mother described it was Miami happened to call. Cristobal called him and checked in on him, I guess at the right time, where Ward was maybe having a few doubts about his NFL stock. I'd seen him mocked mostly as a third-day draft pick. And I think in Ward's mind, and he has an opportunity to prove it on the field, he feels that, in his mind, he's a first-round NFL talent. But unfortunately, that wasn't the feedback he was getting. And I think that there was a little bit of frustration there that he probably wasn't going to be or wouldn't be this year drafted as highly as he thinks he should be. So ultimately, he decided to come back to college for a year. And, of course, down here in South Florida, very thankful he chose Miami.
Yeah, he's a really talented guy. Began his career at Incarnate Word at the FCS level over in the Southland Conference. Last 2 years at Washington State, compiled a record of 12-13 up there in Pullman. Not the easiest place to win, but certainly one that has built a winning tradition. And they're definitely, I know because I've spoken with several of them, Washington State fans that are more down on Cam Ward's prospects. I'm not in that particular camp. Their vantage point is, look, Washington State had made a bowl game 6 or 7 years in a row, and they didn't make one this year after a 4-0 start. They got off to a blistering pace. They were number 13 in the AP poll at 4-0. They had wins over Wisconsin. They had wins over Oregon State. It was a great start to the year, and then it all kind of fell apart. Sometimes that was Cam Ward's fault. Sometimes it was not. They had a loss at home against Stanford in which they scored just one offensive touchdown, and that was a 3-9 Stanford team. They had another loss against Cal in which their defense gave up over 40 points. So it's definitely a mixed bag, and that has been the Cam Ward experience, is when he's very good, he is making elite NFL caliber throws with pinpoint precision, particularly down the field and on the move. That's what this guy can bring to the table. But there's another side where he turns the ball over. He's had fumble problems. He's had some interception problems that I think got a little bit better as he played his second year at the Power 5 level coming from the FCS. But talk about him in comparison from what you know about him to Tyler Van Dyke, who's off to Wisconsin in the quarterback carousel. What can he do that Tyler Van Dyke was not able to do?
Well, the first big thing is his ability to extend plays and make off-schedule plays. That's Tyler Van Dyke. There wasn't a whole lot of ability to improvise. There wasn't a whole lot of ability to make something out of nothing. He did hit some big-time throws at times in Miami, but he doesn't have kind of that electric playmaking ability that Cam Ward in theory, brings to the table. The other thing with Van Dyke, and you did bring up turnover issues with Ward. So this is not a perfect fix to that problem. But Van Dyke on his best Saturday would go out there and look like a first-round draft pick. On his worst Saturday would look like a guy who can't read a defense and just can't figure anything out. So those were the consistency issues with Van Dyke. And it's one of the big debates that Miami fans and a lot of college football fans had was how much of that is on Van Dyke or how much of that is on the coaching, or even the fact that in 3 years he had 3 different offensive coordinators. So there wasn't a whole lot of consistency there from a coaching standpoint. But I think the hope would be if you compare a guy like Cam Ward to Tyler Van Dyke. Van Dyke has a very high ceiling, very low floor. There would be some hope that Ward could bring a little bit more consistency, because there were some Saturdays when Van Dyke just looked completely lost and completely off psychologically. And then, just the ability to extend plays, I think, is a big thing that Ward brings to the table. And, hopefully a little bit more consistent accuracy, because, again, there were definitely some deep throws where Tyler Van Dyke would just puzzlingly miss a lot of throws short and get intercepted on deep passes. So I think Miami's hoping to fix some of those things with Ward coming in.
So my concern about Cam Ward going to Miami from Ward's vantage point is not that he's going to make plays, and I have no doubt that no matter where he goes, he'd be, somewhat of an inconsistent player. That's just what he is at this point in time. I do think there's another gear for him. I think there is a guy who, as a football player can be a better version than what we've seen and be more consistently the best version of himself. But I raised this concern several weeks ago about Cam Ward going to Miami because it was being rumored at the time. Now, of course, it's official that he's going to Mario Cristobal, whose track record with quarterbacks, any way you slice it, is bad. There isn't even a silver lining. I'm an Oregon guy, and I'm very well versed in this. He had Justin Herbert, did not develop him to his maximum potential. The guy who was ready and waiting, Tyler Shuck, ended up having to transfer, couldn't hold on to the starting job, didn't fully develop. 5-star quarterback recruit Ty Thompson never materialized into a starter. Anthony Brown always left more to be desired. Tyler Van Dyke, Alex just touched on all the struggles that he had at times as Miami's quarterback. The track record is not good for Mario Cristobal. Why can Cam Ward be different?
Yeah, well, first of all, and I'm sure you guys heard this over in Oregon covering that team, there is definitely a hope that Mario Cristobal allows some of his assistants a little bit more leeway and a little bit less micromanaging from his standpoint. Now, with that said, the jury is still out from a Miami standpoint on offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, who's also the quarterback's coach. Now, on the plus side for him, it seemed like he did great work with Clayton Tune in his final year at Houston. And, going back a little while, he was the quarterback's coach for Geno Smith at West Virginia. And of course, Geno Smith had, put up great college numbers and did a great job there and all that. So Shannon Dawson has had his fingerprints on some really good quarterbacks who have had successful seasons. So that's one of the things you think of. But I get it. Like what you're talking about, a lot of people throw out the term quarterback killer in terms of Mario Cristobal. I think that if you look from Ward's vantage point, he definitely sees a good offensive line at Miami. He sees a good stable of running backs. That's an area, offensive line and also running back, where Miami's absolutely loaded to try to take some of that pressure off of him. Mark Fletcher, heading into his second year, had a dynamic first year at Miami. A.J. Allen, Henry Parrish, a guy that we haven't really seen yet because he's had injury troubles his first couple of years, Trevante Citizen. There's very high hopes for him as well. Go ahead.
And one point I want to interject on that is that's something he did not have at Washington State.
Right.
Their offensive line struggled. They never developed a running game in either year that he was there. So if you're a Canes fan thinking this is all doom and gloom based on how we're framing this discussion, that's not entirely the case. I'm not that high on Cristobal with the quarterbacks, but having a great offensive line, having a running game, those are things that Cam Ward has not had before.
Yeah, exactly. That's well said. That's definitely a contrast from his time at Washington State. I think Miami could probably try to add another veteran receiver in the transfer portal, but they're in decent shape at wide receiver. Xavier Restrepo had an all-conference season in the ACC last year. Jacoby George had a really good year. Miami, for whatever reason, didn't use their tight ends enough in the passing game last year. That's something I hope that they incorporate. And I think another important thing to consider, Spencer, as to why Ward did decide that Miami could be a good fit for him. I think there's definitely been a collaboration on trying to put him in situations offensively that can help him improve his NFL draft stock. Whether it plays out that way or not is yet to be seen. But I know that something that Ward is interested in is working from more pro-style concepts than he was working out of at Washington State, because he feels like that's something, if he can develop that a little bit more and get some more stuff under center on film, that can, help him improve his NFL draft stock for next year. And I think that there were definitely in agreement, and that's something obviously Cristobal would not be opposed to. Shannon Dawson historically comes from an air raid coaching tree, but there were probably some concessions on his part to say, we are willing to tweak and adapt the offense for you to hopefully maximize Ward's strengths and to also help him improve his NFL draft stock if he can round out his abilities a little bit more.
Last thing real quick before we wrap up today's show, does this make Miami an ACC contender, having Cam Ward at quarterback?
Yeah, it should. Obviously, if Miami's not an ACC contender this coming season, it means one of two things. Either the team was absolutely ravaged by injuries, or you get some of those coaching mistakes, like not taking a knee when you can finish the game with a victory.
I wasn't going to bring it up. I've been burned by it before. I wasn't going to bring it up. Alex Donno, Locked On Canes, thanks so much. Appreciate it.